Welcome to the deep dive. If you're looking to get a really sharp understanding of the upcoming NFL draft, you're in the right place.
Absolutely.
We're zeroing in today on those potential first-round trade-ups for 2025, but also looking at the bigger picture, what actually makes for a successful draft strategy.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
And to do that, we've gone through insights from CBSSports.com, ESPN, PFF, Cover One, Sports Insight, all pretty recent stuff from around April 2025.
Good cross-section of sources.
Our mission today, basically, is to pull out the key info,
Hmm.
which teams might be wheeling and dealing in round one, why they make those moves, and importantly, how do we even judge if a draft was actually good? Sound good?
Let's do it. It's always fascinating right before the draft, isn't it? All the speculation.
Totally.
And that CBSSports.com piece you mentioned, it's a good starting point. They outline some teams potentially looking to move up. What jumped out at you there?
Well, the first ones are maybe the most obvious, the Cleveland Browns and the New York Giants.
Right, the quarterback situations there.
Exactly. The thinking is if a QB, they like maybe Shedder Sanders, maybe someone else starts to slide a bit, both teams still kind of searching for that long-term answer under center could get aggressive.
Makes sense. That position drives so much.
And what's really interesting is the idea that the Giants might feel they need to jump ahead of the Browns to get their guy.
Ooh, okay. So potential head-to-head competition for a pick.
Could be. It definitely sets the stage for some early first-round drama if those QBs start moving.
Yeah, that perceived value of the top passers really shapes everything early on.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the Giants may be seeing a vet as just short-term. That really underlines the urgency teams feel, doesn't it?
It does. Then CBS Sports brought up the Patriots, New England.
Okay, they're in a bit of a different spot. Two high picks.
Right, number 4 overall and then early in the second. And clear needs, tackle, and a receiver.
So what's the potential move there?
The theory is they might use that early second rounder to trade back into the late first round.
Ah, okay. Why would they do that instead of just picking early in the second?
Well, it's about securing talent at both spots, potentially. Say they take a left tackle at 4.
Uh-huh.
This move lets them maybe target a top receiver who's still there late in the first, like Emeka Egbuka or Luther Burden III, perhaps.
Gotcha. Or vice versa. Receiver first, then tackle.
Exactly. It's using that draft capital strategically to hit both big needs, rather than just hoping someone good falls to them later.
Yeah, maximizing the value of having those two premium picks.
Yeah.
Smart. The article mentioned a couple of others too, maybe less obvious ones, like the Saints.
Right. This was interesting. The article itself kind of suggests it might not be the best move for New Orleans,
Okay.
but it acknowledges their history. They've made bold trade-ups before, sometimes when people didn't expect it.
So past behavior is maybe an indicator, even
Yeah.
if the current logic doesn't scream trade up.
Yeah,
Okay.
something to keep an eye on. Then you've got the 49ers. They're loaded with picks, like 11 of them, and they have needs at premium spots. So the thinking is they could package some picks to jump up for a top edge rusher if one starts to fall near them.
That makes sense, especially with that many picks to play with. And the Texans.
Texans too, yeah. Could be looking to trade up for more O-line help or maybe another receiver for C.J. Stroud, to pair with Nico Collins, especially if there's a run at those positions.
Right, reacting to the board. All those make sense based on needs and capital. But then CBS mentioned a different motivation for teams like the Bills, Chiefs, and Eagles potentially trading up.
Yeah, this is the contender's dilemma angle.
Okay.
These teams might not have massive glaring holes, but they could trade up to basically block another team, maybe a rival, from getting a player they really like.
Defensive draft or offensive, I guess, preventing talent accumulation elsewhere.
Exactly, keeping their edge. The Bills have extra picks this year, the Chiefs are always active traders, and, well, Howie Roseman and the Eagles are known for draft day moves, aren't they?
Definitely adds another layer of a strategy to watch for. Okay, so moving on slightly, CBS Sports also dug into Shedder Sanders' draft stock. Big topic. What were the key points there?
This was fascinating. You've got the reports of him visiting the Giants suggesting high interest.
Right. Top 3 pick buzz sometimes.
But then the article emphasizes that a lot of NFL scouts reportedly don't have a first-round grade on him.
Okay, and is that about the off-field stuff or?
Apparently not. The article stresses it's more about a perceived lack of, quote, special talents from an evaluation standpoint, not personality.
Interesting. Purely on-field assessment concerns from scouts.
Yeah. And there's even a little nugget suggesting that if he does go in the first, it might be partly driven by team owners.
Wow. That potential scout versus owner dynamic is always a storyline to watch, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about Sanders himself? What's his view?
Well, he's definitely confident. He apparently said teams would be fools not to draft him, citing his consistency.
Okay, fair enough. He believes in himself.
But interestingly, the report also suggests he actually hopes he might slide past the very top picks
Really? Why?
to land with what he sees as a more stable organization. So it's a confident but maybe slightly unusual stance to take publicly.
Huh. That's definitely a narrative to follow on draft night.
Hmm.
Okay, let's shift gears. ESPN's approach was different, right? Giving every team an A grade pre-draft.
Yeah, that was unusual. Instead of grading picks before they happen, which is impossible,
Right.
they focused on outlining the optimal strategy for each team heading into the draft. Like, should they trade up, trade down? Which positions should they prioritize based on this year's class strength?
So it's about the best process or plan, given the possibilities.
Exactly. Unfortunately, the excerpts we saw didn't detail the specific strategies for each team.
Too bad. But the core idea is still useful, right? That teams need a clear plan to maximize value, whether it's moving up for the guy or trading down for more chances.
Precisely. And speaking of value, Cover 1 looked at how we even evaluate draft success after the fact. That's always tricky. What methods did they cover?
They laid out a few key ones. First, approximate value, or AV.
Okay, I've heard of that.
It tries to compare players across different eras using a single number. It's useful for big picture stuff, generalizations.
But maybe not for comparing two specific guys drafted the same year.
Exactly. The article notes it's not precise enough for that level. They used Clellan Ferrell and Ed Oliver as an example of its limitations in direct comparison.
Gotcha. So broad strokes. What else?
Then there are grading scales. This is more intuitive, maybe. It's about expectations versus results.
Like, did a first rounder become a good starter? That kind of thing?
Yeah. They mentioned scales from Bleacher Report, and Cover One's own Anthony Prohaska has one. His sets benchmarks by round, like a first rounder, should be a solid starter, maybe B plus to A level, earns a second contract.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, makes sense. What are the downsides of grading, though?
Well, two main things. One, there's often no clear time element. How quickly does a player need to hit that mark?
Good point. Year 2, year 3.
Right. And second, there's subjectivity. Who's assigning the grades? What criteria are they really using? It can vary.
True. Grades can feel a bit arbitrary sometimes. What other evaluation tools did Cover 1 mention?
They talked about draft capital. This is where you assign point values to each pick.
Ah, the Jimmy Johnson chart or the analytics versions?
Exactly. They mentioned Jimmy Johnson, Rich Hill, Chase Stewart charts. The basic idea is to quantify a pick's worth, which helps evaluate trades, right?
Sure.
Football Outsiders apparently uses career AV combined with this draft capital value to calculate a team's draft return on investment.
Oh, wait. If AV isn't perfectly player-specific, doesn't that create issues there too?
That's the criticism Cover 1 pointed out. You're relying on that potentially flawed AV metric again.
Okay, so still maybe not perfect. Was there anything else?
Yeah, one more. Total points earned, or TPE. It's an SIS metric.
TPE, how does that work?
It's based on expected points added EPA. EPA tries to measure the point value gained or lost on every single play. TPE adds up a player's positive and negative EPA contributions over time. The argument is it's more player-specific and play-by-play focused than AV.
Okay, that sounds potentially more granular. Any drawbacks?
It's newer. The data apparently only goes back to 2016 or so.
Yeah.
So less historical context, maybe.
Got it. So it seems like there's no single silver bullet for evaluating drafts, huh? Each method has its pros and cons.
Pretty much. It's about using different tools to get a fuller picture. Now, PFF looked at recent history first-round picks since 2020 using their metrics. What did they find?
Right, PFF used their wins above replacement, WAR, and their own offensive and defensive grades. With WAR, the big finding was, perhaps unsurprisingly, that teams drafting QBs in the first round generally had higher cumulative WAR since 2020.
Which teams did they cite?
Bengals, Chargers, Dolphins, Jaguars, Texans, and they actually rated Joe Burrow as the second most valuable player in the league overall since 2020 by WAR.
Wow, okay. High impact. And what about teams at the other end of the WAR scale?
They tended to be teams that haven't made the postseason much recently. Raiders, Titans, Rams, Saints, Colts were mentioned.
Interesting correlation there. Did their offensive grades show a similar pattern?
Yeah, pretty much. Teams getting strong offensive production from first-rounders, Bengals, Vikings, Lions, Falcons, Cowboys generally had better offenses. And teams struggling on offense often had lower offensive grades from their first-round picks. Colts, Titans, Browns, Panthers, Raiders again. It really highlights how hitting on offensive talent early can fuel the whole unit.
Makes total sense. And defensively? Same story.
Largely, yes. Teams like the Cowboys, Rams, Jets, Texans, Broncos got impactful defensive performances from their first-round guys, reflected in high PFF defensive grades.
Okay.
And teams that struggled defensively often had lower grades there. Titans, Chargers, Saints, 49ers, and yeah, the Raiders popped up again.
So the takeaway from PFF seems pretty clear then.
Yeah, it really hammers home that finding those genuine star players, especially in the first round, is just critical if you want to compete consistently. It's kind of obvious, but their data backs it up.
Right. It quantifies that feeling. Now, NFL Draft Buzz focused specifically on the why behind trades trading up versus trading down. What were the core reasons?
For trading up, the main driver is simple. You identified one specific guy you absolutely love, you think he's a game changer, and you go get him.
Like the Bucks going up for Tristan Wirfs.
Exactly. That was the example they used. You pay the premium because you believe that much in the player.
Okay. And trading down.
That's about accumulating assets. More picks means more lottery tickets, basically. Increases your odds of finding value, builds depth across the roster.
So quantity over perceived top-end quality sometimes.
Kind of, yeah. Or just hedging your bets. They also stress how crucial it is for teams to understand those draft pick value charts we mentioned earlier.
The Jimmy Johnson one, the analytics ones.
Right. Knowing the price of picks, like the hashtag 1 pick being worth 3,000 points, hashtag 3 maybe 2,200, is essential for making smart trades and not getting fleeced.
And being flexible too, I imagine.
Absolutely. They mentioned flexibility is key. You need a plan, but you also need to be ready to adapt as the board falls differently than expected.
It really is a high-stakes game of balancing needs, value, and opportunity. Okay, finally, Sports Insight took that broader view, the draft, as the bedrock of team building. What were their main points?
They really framed the draft as the primary way teams get their cornerstone players for the future. Explain the basics of the order based on record, how common trades are.
Keeping the stage.
Yeah, and they called it a high-stakes poker game, which feels right. The pressure is immense. They brought up the contrast between genius picks like Mahomes or Russell Wilson and the infamous disasters like Jamarcus Russell or Mitchell Trubisky. The impact is huge either way.
No doubt. Did they touch on different drafting philosophies?
Yep. The classic debate, best player available, BPA, versus drafting for need.
Always a discussion.
They also warned against overthinking things, using the Raiders as an example there. And they mentioned the trade up versus trade down dynamic again, citing the Patriots' history of often trading back.
So different paths teams can take.
Right. And they argued successful drafting builds the foundation, gets fans excited, and can lead to dynasties like the Patriots had, or help teams like the Bengals turn things around. They contrasted that with teams like the Lions, who struggled for so long.
And the role of analytics came up too.
Definitely. They highlighted how analytics are increasingly used not just to evaluate players looking at efficiency, durability, specific situations, but also to figure out the value of the draft picks themselves.
So it's informing both player selection and trade strategy.
Exactly. It's becoming deeply integrated. Okay, so pulling all this together, what are the big themes looking ahead to 2025?
Well, it really seems like those quarterback situations, particularly with the Browns and Giants, could absolutely trigger some major first-round movement.
Yeah, that feels like the biggest potential domino.
And teams like the Patriots, with multiple high picks and clear needs, seem primed to be active, maybe maneuvering for specific targets.
Plus those contenders, Bills, Chiefs, Eagles, you can't rule them out making a move, maybe more strategically to block a rival or grab someone falling?
Right. And it's clear that evaluating how successful a draft was is complex. There are lots of metrics, AV, grades, TPE, worn unperfect, all offering different insights.
But the underlying truth seems to be that those first-round picks, man, they have such a massive impact on where a team is headed short-term and long-term.
Absolutely undeniable. Hitting in the first round changes trajectories.
So while we've looked at all these potential scenarios and evaluation methods,
The draft itself is always unpredictable, isn't it? That's what makes it so compelling to watch unfold. You never really know what's going to happen.
exactly. Which leads to a final thought. Considering all these ways to measure draft success, AV, grades, capital, TPE, PFF's metrics, which approach do you think actually does the best job of predicting long-term team success? And maybe more immediately, how could these potential first-round trades we've talked about actually shift the future fortunes of the teams involved?
Yeah. How will those moves look in 3, 4, 5 years using these different lenses?
Definitely something to chew on as we wait for the names to be called. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.